Hi, I've got a few different handguns with me today. I've got a single action auto, a double action auto, a striker action auto, and a double action revolver. Obviously the way these work is quite a bit different from each other, and they each have very different types of trigger pulls. And what we're talking about today is specifically the different types of trigger pulls and specifically how that affects accuracy. Now before we go into that, let me give you a brief rundown on how these work. The single action autoloader. Put your magazine in, put a round in the chamber, it cocks your hammer, and then you engage a safety and put it in your holster. And then disengage the safety when you fire. The real plus of these is virtually all single action autoloaders have a very short, very crisp trigger. The downside being you're walking around with a cocked autoloader in your holster, which can make some people nervous. So, an option is a double action autoloader. Put your magazine in, put a round in the chamber, your hammer's cocked, you hit this hammer drop. No, it won't go off when you do that. And now you don't have to walk around with a cocked autoloader in your holster. However, the way this works is when you go to fire it, your first trigger pull is a very long, deliberate trigger pull. Then your action cycles and all subsequent trigger pulls are, by comparison, quite short. Now this is difficult enough for me to explain. Let me give you a close-up of just how this works. So the way a double action autoloader works is you put in your magazine, put a round in the chamber, your hammer is cocked, drop the hammer. You can see then that for your first trigger pull, the trigger pull is very long. Then your action has cycled and now your hammer is cocked and all subsequent trigger pulls are very short. However, the downside of this is, look at how much slop there is in this trigger. Remember, this still has a round in the chamber. There is this much slop and then there's creep. This is not the short, crisp single action trigger pull that you get from most single action autoloaders. And just about every double action autoloader I've ever fired has more or less this kind of sloppy trigger. See what I mean? Different than both of those is the striker action. Now this, you put your magazine in, put a round in the chamber, but on most striker actions there is no external hammer or anything like that to deal with. Now, like the double action, your first trigger pull is long, but not near as long as most double action autoloaders. And unlike the double action, your second trigger pull is exactly the same as your first, and the third is just the same as your second, and so on and so forth. It gives you the advantage of your trigger pulls the same every time. Now, different than all of these is the double action revolver. Now, it's called double action because it can work two different ways. One, you can just pull the trigger, but each trigger pull is a very long, fairly difficult trigger pull. Some of them can actually be fairly hard depending on what kind of gun you have. And you can also, the other way it works is you can cock the hammer. Now you see this trigger moves back, and that gives you a very short, very crisp trigger pull for more precise shots at long range, similar to the way the single action autoloader does. When it comes to how the trigger pull affects accuracy, there are some people of the opinion that it has a great deal of effect. Other people think that with a little bit of practice you can overcome just about any trigger pull, and it really doesn't make all that much difference. Well, let's shoot some targets and see what kind of difference it does make. So we've got 4 targets here. We'll shoot from 15 yards. We'll put 5 shot groups on each one of these and see how those groups compare. And we'll start with our single action auto, a Colt government model. Now we'll try a double action autoloader, and the one we're shooting today is this Beretta Model 92 FS. Now we'll try a striker action, and the one I'm using today is this Glock Model 22 in caliber 40 Smith & Wesson. Now we'll try our double action revolver, and what I'm shooting today is a Smith & Wesson Model 15. So how'd we do? Well, I don't see that any of them are significantly better than any of the rest. The single action auto, which a lot of people will tell you is the most accurate, certainly didn't do any better than the rest of them did. The double action revolver, which a lot of people will tell you is the least accurate, they think you can't hit anything at any distance because of the long trigger pull, did really well. However, this was slow fire. Remember I said you could cock the hammer of the double action revolver for more precise shots? That's exactly what I was doing. On the double action auto, I didn't have to worry about the transition from the long first trigger pull to all the subsequent ones. I just cocked the hammer for the first shot. That's a luxury you have in a slow fire kind of thing. Well, let's try this shooting a little more rapidly. We'll go back and I'll shoot these as fast as I think I can hit them, and we'll actually shoot double action with our double action guns and see if that makes any difference in the accuracy. And we'll shoot from 10 yards. So how'd we do? Well, shooting 10 yards fairly quickly, you can see that there still isn't really a difference in the accuracy of these guns. Shooting the double action revolver in a double action mode, still able to hold a really good group. The only real downfall was with the striker action. That wasn't worth a damn. In fact, one of them barely even nicked the edge of the target. However, this probably represents how much I dislike the sights on that particular gun more than it represents any kind of failure with the trigger. So this tells us what it tells us, but there's another aspect to this too, and that's shooting from a rapid presentation. Coming out of the holster quickly and shooting a two-shot drill. That can tell us a lot too. So let's replace these targets, we'll go back 7 yards, and we'll do some two-shot drills with our various guns and see what kind of difference there is in our groups. Now we're going to do what we call two-shot drills. Come out of the holster and fire 2 shots. And we'll do that 3 times so we get 6 shots on the target. And we'll start with our single action auto. Side note, anytime you see someone trying to demonstrate on film how fast they can come out of the holster and shoot, yeah, make sure you can see both the shooter and the target on film at the same time. So let's see how we do. Okay, not bad. Now let's see how our double action auto compares. Well, we did okay with the single action auto, but the thing about single action autos is you have to remember to disengage the safety before you fire and re-engage the safety before you holster it again. That is a thing that you have to practice and train with, because if you don't get that safety disengaged, you could be in a lot of trouble. If you don't re-engage it before you stick it back in your holster, you could be in a lot of trouble there too. The double action auto will at least alleviate some of that. I don't have to remember to disengage a safety before I fire. But this is at the cost of my first shot and my second shot have very distinctly different trigger pulls. And remember, you do have to remember to hit the decock lever before you holster it. So all that having been said, let's shoot this and see how we do. Not too bad, and as always, remember to disengage that trigger. A moment ago with the double action I said disengage the trigger. Sorry, I used the wrong terminology. I meant hit the decock lever. Now this striker action does not have a decock lever or external safeties, and this is a perceived advantage. It also has the perceived advantage of a consistent trigger pull every single time. It's actually a very simple automatic to operate. So let's see how we do with this. Okay, now let's see how all of those compare to a double action revolver. Now, as I've said before, there's a perception that with the double action revolver's long trigger pull, you're going to lose some accuracy. So far today, that hasn't been the case. Let's see how we do on this two-shot drill. Let's go take a closer look. So how'd we do on our two-shot drill? Like everything else we've done today, there doesn't seem to be a significant difference in any of them. The striker action has fallen a little short today, but that really reflects me more than it does the gun. The big thing with all of these is that it's not so much which is better, but which one is better for you. Single action autoloaders, with their very crisp trigger pull, can be shot very accurately, but sometimes that very short trigger pull can work against you if you get careless. They also have a long learning curve with remembering to take the safety off and then re-engage the safety. There's a lot of work that goes into a single action autoloader. Double action autoloaders are the same story. There's a lot of work that goes into being able to manage the difference between the double to single trigger pull, remembering to hit the decock lever. Double action revolvers, there's also a long learning curve with being able to manipulate that long trigger pull and being able to cock the hammer and shoot single action and knowing when to do either. There's also a lot of technique that goes into reloading a double action revolver. That's a topic for a different time, but I thought I'd mention it. The thing about striker actions is, because most of them don't have external safeties or decock levers or anything like that, because the trigger pull is consistent every single time, they can be a lot easier to use. You can reach a reasonable level of proficiency with a lot less work than you can with some of these other guns. So the bottom line to all of these is that none of them is really better than any of the others, at least in anything I can show here today. The real thing is finding not which one is the best, but which one is the best for you. So, as always, don't try this at home. I'm what you call a professional, and thanks for watching the single versus double versus striker video.